Section 1. You will hear a survey company representative ringing a person to obtain some information. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello?
Hello? Who is this?
Hello, I'm a representative of the Tally-Ho Survey Company, and I'd like to ask you a few questions regarding exercise.
Ah, that's an interesting subject.
Yes, we think so too.
But I'm afraid I'm a bit busy at the moment.
Don't worry, this will only take about 4 minutes at the most. It's 10:25 now, so it will all be over by 10:30.
Well, all right, if it's that short.
It will be. So, one of the first things I need to know is where you are. That is, which suburb or area of the city. The last client was in Blackburn, for example.
Blackburn, that's close to me. I'm in Box Hill.
Another eastern suburb, then. I have a friend in Box Hill, too. Interesting place. Now, I need your approximate age for this survey. Are you younger than 20, between 20 and 29, 30 and 39, and so on?
I'll turn 40 in a few months, so that puts me in the 40 to 49 age group.
Well, that's in a few months, so right now you're in the 30 to 39.
Oh, right, so put that then.
OK. Now, I need to know your occupation. The last caller was a housewife, for example. The one before that, a teacher.
I used to be a teacher too, teaching cookery.
And now?
Now you can just put domestic duties. Actually, I hope to begin a new job soon as a cook, but that won't be for some time yet. I have to wait for my husband's restaurant to open.
Cook? That sounds interesting. But it's domestic duties for now. OK. That just leaves some information about your family. This is not obligatory at all, so if you don't want to answer, that's fine.
What sort of information exactly?
Oh, it's very broad. Married with children, single mother, that sort of thing. The last customer said she was a single mother.
I'm married and not a mother. Put married, no children.
I'm married with children myself, but I'll put in your details. And that finishes the profile and just leaves the actual survey itself if you're ready to proceed.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
All right, let's begin the survey now about your exercise habits.
I'm afraid I don't exercise much at all.
Well, the main question is in what form you take your exercise, however little that may be. For example, in just cleaning. Do you clean the house?
My husband does the cleaning, actually, but I walk to the supermarket and shops very often, up to 4 times a week.
I'll put that then, unless there's something else.
Nothing else, really. But I diet. I'm very strict about what I eat. Oh, and I do yoga, although that's not very energetic. More a form of relaxation and to tighten my muscles.
They're both important, of course. But what about sport? Do you undertake any sporting activities? This could be very infrequent. In the past, for example.
My husband plays basketball at the local school, and I sometimes watch. When he was younger, he was in a basketball team, but I never participated.
Have you done anything at all?
I used to hike in a nearby national park.
Well, that's a definite physical activity, so I'll put that, but not basketball. All right, that just leaves future exercise intentions. Do you plan or expect to do, at some stage, any form of exercise?
I once dreamt of doing modern dance, but that's never going to happen. Realistically, I'm thinking about going swimming at the local aquatic centre, although my husband thinks we should just jog. I can't see myself doing that though. Too tiring.
I can understand. I used to jog too, and it really makes you sweat. I'd say swimming's a much better option.
But I'll be starting this job as a cook in my husband's restaurant. I imagine I'll be very tired doing all those late shifts. But if I have any energy left over, I might go to the aquatic centre to release some stress.
All right, well, that's the end of the survey. Thank you very much for your time.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute.
Now turns to part 2.
You will hear a guidance counsellor talking to a group of students. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 14. Listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 14.
Hello everyone. I'm the Counselling Administrator here at St Ives College, and I've been asked to come and talk to you about our counselling team and the services that we offer. We have 3 professional counsellors here at St Ives, Louise Bagshaw, Tony Denby and Naomi Flynn. They each hold daily one-on-one sessions with students, but which counsellor you see will depend on a number of factors. If you've never used a counsellor before, then you should make an appointment with Naomi Flynn. Naomi specialises in seeing new students and offers a preliminary session where she will talk to you about what you can expect from counselling, followed by some simple questions about what you would like to discuss. This can be really helpful for students who are feeling a bit worried about the counselling process. Naomi is also the best option for students who can only see a counsellor outside office hours. She is not in on Mondays, but starts early on Wednesday mornings and works late on Thursday evenings, so you can see her before your first class or after your last class on those days. Louise staffs our drop-in centre throughout the day. If you need to see someone without a prior appointment, then she is the one to visit. Please note that if you use this service, then Louise will either see you herself or place you with the next available counsellor. If you want to be sure to see the same counsellor on each visit, then we strongly recommend you make an appointment ahead of time. You can do this at reception during office hours or by using our online booking form. Tony is our newest addition to the counselling team. He is our only male counsellor, and he has an extensive background in stress management and relaxation techniques. We encourage anyone who is trying to deal with anxiety to see him. Tony will introduce you to a full range of techniques to help you cope with this problem, such as body awareness, time management, and positive reinforcement.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 15 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 15 to 20.
Each semester, the counselling team runs a number of small group workshops. These last for 2 hours and are free to all enrolled students. Our first workshop is called Adjusting. We've found that tertiary education can come as a big shock for some people. After the structured learning environment of school, it is easy to feel lost. In this workshop, we will introduce you to what is necessary for academic success. As you might expect, we're targeting first-year students with this offering. Getting organised follows on from the first workshop. Here, we're going to help you break the habit of putting things off, get the most out of your time, and discover the right balance between academic and recreational activities. With Getting Organised, we're catering to a broader crowd, which includes all undergraduates and postgraduates. Next up is a workshop called Communicating. The way people interact here may be quite different to what you're used to, especially if you've come from abroad. We'll cover an area that many foreign students struggle with: how to talk with teachers and other staff. We'll cover all aspects of multicultural communication. International students tend to get a lot out of this class, so we particularly encourage you to come along. But I must say that sometimes students from a local background find it helpful too. So, everyone is welcome. The anxiety workshop is held later on in the year and deals with something you will all be familiar with: the nerves and anxiety that come when exams are approaching. Many students go through their entire academic careers suffering like this, but you don't have to. Come to this workshop and we'll teach you all about relaxation and how to breathe properly, as well as meditation and other strategies to remain calm. We've tailored this workshop to anyone who is going to sit exams. Finally, we have the motivation workshop. The big topic here is how to stay on target and motivated during long-term research projects. This workshop is strictly for research students, as less advanced students already have several workshops catering to their needs. Well, that's it. Thanks for your time. If you have any questions or want more information about our services, do come and see us at the counselling service.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3.
Part 3. You will hear 3 students, Anna, Jane and Mark, planning a project about cinema on their Media Studies course. First, you have time to look at questions 21 to 25.
So, Jane, Mark, we need to press on with the assignment.
Yes, we do, Anna.
And we need to begin by going to the best sources of information.
Right. Now, we're looking into how films get altered sometimes if they're not going to do very well.
We need to know quite detailed things. So, ordinary magazines, leisure interest ones, may lack the detail we're after. Specialist magazines, on the other hand, will probably be helpful.
I think that's true.
OK, so we'll root out some of those. And what else?
There ought to be stuff available online.
But we'll have to be selective.
Sure, not general cinema websites, you mean?
I think it'd be useful to go onto studio websites. Then we'd get pretty specific information.
Even if it might be a bit biased. Yes, OK. Anything else?
I think we also need to think about the point of consumption, so perhaps reviews would be good to look through.
OK, though we'll get most by looking at local reviews, I think.
I agree.
Good.
So far, so good. Now we'll gather all that together. We can take one source each, and then...
I don't know.
About what, Jane?
I mean, OK, so we get all this stuff, probably loads of it, but do we know how to assess the usefulness of it? I know it'll all be factual and so true in that sense, but we need to know what it can really tell us.
Perhaps we should cross that bridge when we come to it. Mark?
Yes, though I think Jane's got a point. But the problem for me is the context we're working in. We've got the assignment instructions and, in a sense, it's all very straightforward. We know which parts are worth how many marks and so forth. But the focus seems to be heavily on the objective and quantitative side of things, whereas I would be hoping to be asked for more interpretative work. And there would have to be time to do that within the framework we've been given.
Well, again, I think we should just see how we go with it.
Now you have time to look at questions 26 to 30. Now listen to the final part of the conversation and answer questions 26 to 30.
Should we check that we're clear on just how films are altered?
Good idea. We'll list the various cures that filmmakers use when a film looks like it might be going to fail.
The first one is called Tweak Every Joke. Sometimes they change lots of the jokes after showing the first version to a test audience. Comedy is the only film genre with a reliable formula. The more the audience laugh, the more income the film gets.
And it's not very funny if your film makes a loss.
And the next one they call Change the Ending. Occasionally they completely change the way a film ends. It seems a bit strange maybe, but the problem is it's far from easy to know in advance what reaction you'll get from an audience. So if it turns out after all that the test audience doesn't like your ending, you've no choice but to do another one.
What's the third one?
That'd be fix the tone. If, for example, your film begins as a kind of gentle comedy, but then gets too serious or horror-like, audiences get confused.
So one thing that really matters is being consistent, you mean?
Yes, that's the logic. I think audiences don't want to have to switch track.
It's more complicated than people imagine, isn't it? Now, the next cure is a big one. Reshoot. This may seem drastic, but in some cases it's the only option available. It's very expensive, of course, but the film's backers will see this as protecting their investment.
Are there any others?
One more, and it's another big one, or at least has the potential to be a big one. It's shift the genre. And this is done when the test audience seem to only like one half of the equation, as it were. Maybe you made a musical, but they only like your comedy storyline, not the songs. So you do it all again, without the songs. It could broaden the film's appeal, get a wider audience.
It's weird to think how much extra work has gone into some films, isn't it?
The end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 4.
Part 4. You will hear a talk about the history of the Mediterranean Sea. First, you have time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen to the first part of the talk and answer questions 31 to 37.
Now, in looking at the history of anywhere, we need to accompany our discussion of the facts with some consideration of what facts mean, or which facts have meaning. But more of that later. Let's start with looking at one very important period of the history of the Mediterranean, the period of Roman influence. This was born out of the death of Alexander the Great. His grip on the area went, and what directly ensued was a period of intense conflict which focused on the eastern Mediterranean, as opponents sought to gain control of that area. Rome began to emerge from this as a potential dominant force, but obstacles such as a lack of overall planning, and in particular the ever-present menace of piracy, lay in the way of success. Gradually, the Romans improved the power of their ships and fighting equipment. They also formed a series of alliances, which effectively reduced the size and number of enemies, and a key measure they took was creating an office of government specifically charged with repairing their fleets. However many ships they and their enemies had, Rome from now on would have the highest proportion out, patrolling and fighting. There were, of course, no engines in ships in those days, and another aspect in the battle for supremacy was speed through human effort. Rivals built ships with ever-increasing numbers of oars, but what really mattered was the amount of human pulling strength attached to each one, and the Romans, benefiting from their great population of slaves, was able to have every oar pulling faster and harder than anyone else's. Eventually, Rome's dominance was more or less complete. Their possession of the sea became their enjoyment of the sea. Their name for the Mediterranean translates as our sea, and that's how they saw it. The shores were, of course, by now very well fortified, but now the Romans began also to demonstrate their comfort in power and put up a great many large houses, visible far out to sea. Wealthy merchants and retired generals lived in leisure in these temples to their own prosperity. The maritime security of the Mediterranean and the immense availability of trading destinations meant that all sorts of suppliers and craft producers clustered round any reachable section of the sea's edge. Some of these settlements were small, while others were large, producing salt fish in Italy, for example, or the fish sauce that was sent to every corner of the empire from Spain. With dominance of the seaways established, the primary purpose of ships evolved from fighting other ships to transporting goods. Economics generated a drive to carry as much as possible on each trip, and as ships were built for carrying loads such as wine or stone exclusively, these types of specialised vessels led to greater cost-effectiveness. And so things continued for many years. However, I referred before to the question of needing to consider how to approach history. Assumptions about what history is are as varied as the historians who have made the Mediterranean the subject of their studies. Three key historians have moulded in different ways our approaches to understanding the Mediterranean's past: Michel Ballard, Fernand Braudel and Nicholas Horden. The first of these, Ballard, felt strongly that an approach based on examining countries around the Mediterranean as if they shaped its history was inadequate. More was to be learned, he argued, by treating the Mediterranean as one of a number of seas, such as the Black Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, and thus integrated into trading routes that stretched from Madeira to Krakow. Our second historian, Fernand Braudel, took a rather different, though related, tack. He argued that the ways societies operate, right down to their individual members' actions, is subject to permanent conditions, such as whether they inhabit mountain, plain or sea. Features of the coastline and adjacency to the waters of the Mediterranean are thus the focus of his approach. And then we can add a third way of looking at history, or at least the history of the Mediterranean, and that's the one propounded by Nicholas Horden. His arguments are asserted quite strongly, not least because he sees a greater consistency across time than many other historians have allowed for. There are those who take ecological events, particularly catastrophes such as the volcanic destruction of Pompeii, to be the shapers of different sections of the Mediterranean's history. Horden says these are simply incidents, and that the major trends ride on through them. For him, while there may be cultural mutations and fashions in types of consumer goods, what matters is the system of trading goods that satisfy primary needs, such as grain, oil, metals and timber. So, for us, out of this complex of views, our job is to seek a synthesis and form a sophisticated approach, not just to the Mediterranean, but to any time or region in history.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.